we're so glad to be here. We love everything that you're doing with Friendly Circle of Berlin. And one of our book studies was on emotional sobriety. And we love that topic and love what you did at the retreat. And I'll just read our mission at surrenderschool.org. We recover at Surrender School. We recover. Our mission is to share 12-step and other supportive recovery solutions with those who want to live free from disordered or unhealthy, and I will say thinking, because it's not only eating. Alcohol is not the problem, food is not the problem, it's our thinking. And we are not an official 12-step meeting, but we do try to adhere to the spirit of the traditions. And I'd love to tell you a little bit about what's going on at Surrender School. In the past, we have done step studies, and they meet every single week, and we go through all 12 steps. We have many different leaders who lead us. We've done some full book studies. Again, those were weekly meetings, and they're all recorded and on the website. We've done the Emotional Sobriety book by Alan Berger. We've done Gifts of Imperfection. And this year we've done a workshop on the science behind step 1. Currently, we have a Wednesday literature meeting. It meets 3:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And Cher is here with you today. We have the Enneagram workshop. We're on steps 6 and 7 that were presented yesterday. And that, again, is a weekly meeting through each of the 12 steps. We also have a way to work the steps on your own or with a sponsor. So we support sponsors through taking people through the 12 steps. We have meditations on each of the 12 steps. In July, we have an in-person retreat in California. And we still have 3 rooms on site, and there's people who are commuting as well that are available. And coming up, we will have a Joe and Charlie step study, and we have the board has their planning meeting at the retreat, so we'll be planning, and there's more to come. So soon you will hear from Cheryl, and at every one of her presentations, she tells you a lie, and I'll tell you the lie she says. She tells you that she is not an expert on anything. And I keep talking and telling her she is an expert. She is an expert at using the Enneagram to empower 12-step recovery. And I have learned so much each and every week. And so has all of the people in attendance. So and again, these are recorded and on the website. We look forward to you attending some of our workshops, and we're glad to be here. And here is the expert Cher.
All right, let me make sure that I am unmuted. All right. So I want to say, it'd be really nice if the whole world were the same kind of fan that Joy is, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you for Patrick for inviting me back this month. Last month, I covered what was step 0. So I decided it just makes sense to cover step 1. And once again, my belief, and I'll talk about it. Let me go ahead and go to us. So the goal of the workshop that is on Surrender School, and the goal here as well, is basically a personal journey. It is not intended to teach you the Enneagram. So I think some people come and they think, oh, when I'm all done, I'll understand the Enneagram. It's really just intended to help you see that the Enneagram can be a very useful tool while you're working your 12-step program, which is what I found to be true. So it might be a side benefit that you learn quite a bit about the Enneagram, but it's not about the Enneagram. It just shows that the Enneagram is a tool that you can use with your 12-step work. The goal is to help you recognize the wonderful person that you are so that you can relax into your true self, where the God of your understanding resides, or at least touches you. The way you do that is that you recognize the unseen forces that drive our behaviors, the passions or defects or defenses, and then the fixations, which are the stories that we tell ourselves. And if we can see those things, we can actually ask God to help us with them. I call my higher power God. We can catch, and the way we do that is by catching ourselves in the act of all the times that that ego structure that I talked about last time, causes us to act out our persistent defects or defenses, right? That ego structure that basically causes us to defend ourselves and protect ourselves, or at least our ego to protect us. And then to gently remind ourselves to return to our true shining self, because our true self is shining, is brilliant. Okay. I am not an expert on anything except maybe taking very complex ideas and making them simple enough to understand them. But the real research and the real knowledge of Enneagram is either through courses, through books, through there's some really good YouTube videos, that kind of stuff, by people that are really gurus in this. I've studied it about 5 years, which means I understand the basics of it in 5 years. There are people that have been around studying this for, decades. There are monks who studied it years ago for, their entire life. So those are the true experts on this. So I appreciate Joy's thinking, but I feel very comfortable saying, I don't know, never thought about that. So I'm not an expert in the Enneagram. 12 steps, 20 years of 12-step recovery. So maybe. Love the big book. I know that. Okay. Recovery is a process, not an event. And what brought me to the Enneagram is basically my belief that self-contempt, and I learned that self-contempt, for me at least, stops spiritual growth. It's as if my higher power says, okay, you can hate yourself or you can grow spiritually, but you can't do both at the same time. You pick, I'll wait. So, and every time, the first couple times through the steps, right, I believe that the 12-step program, the first time through the steps, it busts your balls, and it's supposed to, because we come on our knees and we come defeated. And it is supposed to bust our balls for sure. But later, right, years and years and years later, right, then every time I went through the steps, I felt more and more contempt for myself because I'd rehearse all the old crap, right? And so the Enneagram helps me to not do that, because I can't hate myself and grow spiritually. It's like gets in the way of that. So that's the reason that I really love the Enneagram. All right. This workshop and the Surrender School workshop is intended for the very reason that the first time through the steps bust your balls. And this is a very compassionate view of things. This basically says, okay, how do I fall in love with my true self, right? And the only way to do that, I talked about last week or last month, is we got to crack that shell of that ego. We have to recognize that there is an ego structure that we've built up that defended us as children. We have to do that. If we don't do that, then we never change. We can't change because that ego structure is so strong. So this is actually meant for people who are experienced 12-step people who've been through in some form or other. There's other things besides 12 steps. I'm not saying that, but basically the ideal audience is somebody who's been through the steps many times, or at least a couple times, and basically is just ready to get to the point that they've accepted responsibility, that they're the cause of most of the problems in their life, and then they're ready to fall in love with themselves again, except their true self this time. Okay, I focus on my own type when I give examples. I am a type 8. And so when I give examples, it usually is from the perspective of the 8, because that is my perspective. This is the diagram of the Enneagram. And basically, it is the key, I guess, to understanding what are some of the gifts of the spirit that I can easily attain. And in some of the other sessions, not the one today, I talk about, what are some of the other, the gifts of the spirit, the nice and good things in life that you can incorporate into yours, even if it's not officially part of your type. Okay. So years ago, before I retired, I've been retired for 2 years now. Prior to that, I worked in software, and I was the vice president of a software company. And I would talk to customers, and the customers would come and complain, I hate the way this does this doesn't, whatever, right? And one of the things that I would say very often when I worked with those people, right, I would say, it's working as designed. Or it might be a shit design, but it's working as designed, right? So, and what I found is in my program as well, when I realized that my body, and the way I learned this, by the way, there is the Science of Step 1 course that Joy talked about, talks about when I ingest whatever is my drug of choice. In my case, I am a member of Overeaters Anonymous, so mine is food. And so basically what I found is when I eat sugar, then my body, the gut does all kinds of shit. My head does all kinds of shit. And that is the working as designed. And it was amazing to me to learn, I'm not broken. This is working as designed. I'm making a decision that starts a cavalcade of crap in my system. And I can choose to continue to do that and have the cavalcade. And then I'm fighting, right? This cascade of shit that happens in my life. Or I can not ingest it. But that, once again, is my choice. And it was such a relief to me. It sounds weird, but it is a relief to realize, no, my body is working the way that it's designed. It's not broken. My choices might be broken and might be bad, right? Bad for me or whatever. Or I might engage in risky behavior, right? But I'm choosing to do that. So it was a relief to me to realize that there's not something broken here. This is working the way that it's supposed to work. I don't have to like it. Matter of fact, there are days I don't like it, but okay. So last week I talked about, whenever we talk about passion, the passion in the Enneagram, it doesn't mean excited or anything. It basically think defects, or in your case, I think you guys say defenses. So it's the things that cause your suffering, which sounds weird for passion, but just think of the movie Passion of the Christ, right? It was basically what caused the suffering. So the things that cause our suffering that's what they mean by passion, basically. It's the defects, the defenses. Okay. Virtue, the way that I look at it is that's the gift of the spirit that I get when I return to my true self. The new definition that I'm doing this time is the fixations. And that's just the stories that our ego tells us to make our behavior, our defects, our defenses, that passion acceptable. So I do something and 8, my history is somebody pisses me off, I get in their face. That's what 8s do, right? That's what 8s with a really strong ego structure do. And almost completely, almost 100% of my amends that I owed in step 9, almost all of them were because of somebody that I got into their face, almost 100%, right? And that's because that is my fixation. The way that this works is they piss me off, I say something to them, I get in their face, and then the story that I would tell myself is, well, anybody would have been upset. I've had every right to get mad, right? Well, what I've learned in program is anger is fatal to me. I can't do that, right? So then how do I get rid of that? That's what the 12 steps are about, right? And what happens here is I get to like disintegrate that ego structure, at least dissipate the ego structure. And it starts with the stories I tell myself, and then my behavior changes, and then my feelings change, and all that starts happening, and it all softens, and I get to return to my true self. All right. What I want to do, we talked last week about that. Good. What I want to do now is introduce some new titles. So the titles, if you were here last month, that's great, because what I did is I talked about the titles of the different types. And like, I'll give an example. The one is called a perfectionist. Well, almost all the titles that are the typical Enneagram titles are what we are like with our ego structure in place. And what I'd really like to do is focus on what we are like when that ego structure is dissipated and we basically are our true selves. So if you know your Enneagram type, listen to that type. If you don't know your Enneagram type, what I would recommend that you do is, I'm going to be talking about avoidances, right? Like what the type strives for and how they do it, what they avoid in order to strive for that. And so just be listening, because maybe it'll clue you into the type that you are if you haven't taken a test or don't know what type you are. Okay. So the one, instead of a perfectionist, the new title, and this is from a book from Michael Naylor that's called The Alchemy of the Enneagram. All right, so the 1 is a tender-hearted teacher. The 2 is an intuitive healer. The 3 is an inspiring champion. The 4 is a creative alchemist. The 5 is a kind wizard. The 6 is a courageous pathfinder. The 7 is a joyful visionary. The 8 is a lion-hearted protector. And the 9 is a gentle mystic. So before I go into a little bit more detail, I'm going to come back to the 8 and just talk. The reason I really love these titles is because usually the 8 is called a challenger, right? Which, okay, I get in people's faces. Yes, I'm a challenger, right? Yes, I used to be absolutely that. But it was so heartening to me to hear that I'm a lion-hearted protector. At my best, I'm a lion-hearted protector. That's awesome. So I love the new titles. I think that that's a really, really wonderful way to see yourself. So what I covered last week for the type 1, and once again, I picked the little beaver, which is an American thing. I don't know if beavers are anywhere else in the world, but they're very industrious. They build dams and streams and so forth. Anyway, so I picked them because they're industrious. And they're called the perfectionist. Their passion, or the thing that causes their suffering, is anger, usually itself. And their virtue is serenity. They have a mantra, and the mantra is intended. If you say your mantra every day, let's say you're a 1 and you say your mantra every day, that helps soften that. At least it did for me. It helps soften that, or at least dissipate a little bit the ego structure once we crack that shell, right? Okay, so the new title for the 1 is the tender-hearted teacher, and they are striving to feel perfect by avoiding criticism, avoiding rule breaking, and avoiding illogical behavior. Their mantra, once again, is it isn't always my responsibility. So this is the 1, and once again, tender-hearted teacher. All right, the 2, and I picked this little dog because this is actually my little dog named Mayhem. He weighs 6 pounds, and he follows me everywhere, and he just adores me. So that's why I picked that for this. Last month, I talked about the 2 being a helper. Their passion or defect, the thing that causes their problem, is pride, and usually pride in what they do for others. And their virtue or gift of the Spirit is humility, understanding what their place is in the world, their relationship to God and other people. Their mantra is ask for what you need and ask again, for the best love comes from a full well. This usually touches the heart of the 2 very much because they don't usually ask for help at all. The new title for them is the intuitive healer. And I can so see this. They are striving to feel connected by avoiding their own needs, avoiding being alone, and avoiding not being needed. They love to be needed. All right. The type 3 is known as the achiever. Their passion or defect is deceit, usually self-deceit. So they don't steal or anything like that, but they deceive themselves. Their virtue is self-honesty, which is what veracity means. And their mantra is to get to truth, I must be informed by my feelings. Their new title, I picked the peacock because they like to look good. And sometimes like dress up good, but sometimes they like to succeed in their careers and that kind of stuff. Okay. They are striving to feel outstanding by avoiding failure, avoiding emotions, and avoiding inefficiency. So they like to avoid any kind of deep emotions. So that's it for them. And once again, they're called the inspiring champion, and they can be very inspirational as leaders or bosses. Okay. The type 4 is known as the individualist, and their passion or defect is envy. And it doesn't mean that they don't want other people to have stuff. They just wish they also had it. And their virtue is equanimity, which is understanding that we are all one. Their mantra is, I have everything I need in this moment to grow. I picked the unicorn because type 4s view themselves as very unique. So the type 4 is called the creative alchemist because at their best, they can turn things into gold for sure. They are striving to feel unique. And the way they do that is by avoiding insignificance, they avoid conforming, and they avoid small talk. If you want to torture a 4, have small talk with them. They don't like small talk. And sometimes they'll just turn small talk into big talk. All right, let's go on to the 5. So the type 5 is known as the observer, and their passion is greed, and it's usually greed for knowledge. And their virtue is the ability to let things go, so non-attachment. Their mantra is making contact with my direct experience and feelings will bring greater clarity and knowing. So so feelings bring knowledge to them because knowledge is a big deal for the 5. And I picked the bear because they hibernate. I don't know I think there's bears in other parts of the world, but anyway, so bears hibernate, at least US bears hibernate. Okay, the new title for this is the kind wizard. They are striving to feel sufficient by avoiding emotional reactions, avoiding crowds, and avoiding not knowing the answer. They really like to know the answer to things. All right, so the type 6 is known as the loyalist. Their passion or defect is fear. The 6 is very complex, and they are afraid to not feel afraid. I mean, their fear is multi-layered. The virtue or gift of the Spirit for them is courage. And their mantra is faith is believing in things unseen. I am guided within. And once again, this is the type 6. And then let's go to the new title for the type 6 is the courageous pathfinder. So isn't that exciting that their main fear is fear, and their true self is a courageous pathfinder. So they walk through the fear. They're striving to feel secure by avoiding being told what to do, avoiding not being prepared, and avoiding self-doubt. All right, the type 7, if you hear my dogs barking, it's because I'm supposed to have a delivery today, which of course inevitably will happen now, but we'll see. All right, the type 7 is known as an adventurer. Their passion or defect is gluttony, and basically that just means they want more and more and more. And their virtue is sobriety, which means not wanting more and more and more. So their mantra is focus and staying present are my holy work. I am enough. And I really love that. I'm actually using this holy work thing. I'll probably talk about that in a little while when I get to 8. But the idea that staying present is the holy work of the 7, and that they are enough. All right, so the 7 is known, their new title is the joyful visionary, and they are striving to feel satisfied by avoiding negative emotions, avoiding rules, and avoiding a lack of options. So they like to have lots and lots of options. I already covered their mantra. Once again, staying present is their holy work, and I think that's an awesome idea. Okay, the 8, which is what I am, is known as the challenger. They have a lust for intensity. They like to have intense things in their life. And their virtue or gift of the spirit is innocence, which is basically seeing things through fresh eyes. So they see things through fresh eyes, right? The true self does. And their mantra is, in my vulnerability lies my strength. I want to talk for a minute about that. I am part of an Enneagram group I've been meeting with for a couple of years. And the first time that they told me my mantra, in my vulnerability lies my strength, I can remember going, what are you talking about? No, in my strength lies my strength, right? And but what I found is part of that dissipation of that ego structure, it just kind of it's softening just naturally as I realize that in my vulnerability lies my strength. And people that know me can now see my vulnerabilities. I used to, like, maybe I fooled myself, but I wanted to be invulnerable. I wanted no one to touch me. Nobody could understand. Nobody, right? I just wanted to seem as if I was strong all the time. And one of the things that my ego structure, that is naturally built up, which I talked about last month, that you build up to basically as a child defend yourself, and then it just stays in place and gets stronger. And I also read something here recently that said it for people that were abused as children, which I was not, but for people that were abused as children, it is so strong that it really, really it's very, very hard to dissipate. And I thought that was just a fascinating, and of course it makes sense, but I thought that was fascinating. But the idea here is as that begins to dissipate, and I realize that being vulnerable is part of life, and it's also part of what makes me human, right? That all of that allows that to dissipate. It's one of the reasons that I'm able, with relatively short notice, to come and teach this class, because it's like, it's okay. I'm sharing what I know, and if it resonates with you, that's great, and if it doesn't, that's okay too, right? And that vulnerability to just be able to say it's okay if it doesn't resonate with you. I'm good with that. It doesn't matter. My job is to, like, put it out there. That's my service, right? Because one of my skills is to be able to put it out there. So I put it out there. You pick it up if you want to, and don't if you don't want to, and all's good. All right, so let's go to type 9 now. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let's talk about what the 8 is, the lion-hearted protector. One of the things that is a blessing and a curse, I guess, of an 8, throughout my life, I have always been completely unable to keep myself from bullying bullies. I don't like bullies, and I am always, I'm not this way now. Now I weigh options, but it used to be no matter what would happen, I would absolutely have to be the bigger dog in the room, have to be. I can remember 8th grade, there were 3 boys that were picking on a girl on the bus as I went home from school. And I can remember I stood up and walked over to them and said, stop that. I could have been hurt, right? But I was completely incapable of not doing that. Now I am capable of at least weighing this. Would this be extremely dangerous? Is there another way? Maybe I can pull that person away. Maybe there's something else I can do. I don't know. I don't run into that. I don't ride a bus anymore, but I don't run into things like that. Anyway, but if I did, it would be interesting to see what would happen. But I am a lion-hearted protector, so I would imagine that at least the impulse is still there, I would guess. So they are striving to feel powerful by avoiding indirectness, avoiding waiting, and avoiding being controlled. And yeah, I'm very direct. That is part of my nature. And I used to be embarrassed by that because everybody else beat around the bush so much, and I was like, oh, whatever. And now I realize there's no reason to be embarrassed. It is the way I am, and it's not like I'm not in anybody's face about it, but I am direct. One of the things that I do in the surrender school is at the end of each of these, and I will have one here too. I have challenges that I say, okay, go home and do this challenge and see how that works for you. See if you can do that. And it's a challenge by type. And one of the challenges is to ask for something by hinting, right? Because I couldn't do it. I tried. I couldn't do it. I can't. I mean, I ask if I need something. I ask, and so the idea of dropping hints. Oh my God! I couldn't even do it. So, but a lot of people are doing the basically doing the challenges and kind of reporting back how this challenge worked for them. So that's exciting to have the challenges in place. And once again, they to avoid waiting. I'm not good at waiting, and also to avoid being controlled. So one of the things that I learned was that with the ego structure in place for the 8, which was right, it builds up and it basically says, okay, and for all of us, this happens. We build up this ego structure and it sits in place defending us. As children, we have to have that or we couldn't even be in a playground, right? So it's in place. And then what happens is we live our life imitating that ego structure. And we actually believe that personality is us. Well, as we work the steps, right, and basically work through and do our moral inventory and do our amends and all that, that cracks that shell and begins to dissipate that ego structure. If we continue to work on ourselves and use spiritual tools like the Enneagram, what happens is that dissipates more and more, and then we are our true self. For an 8, what happened to me is I realized because I used to try to be strong and courageous. And I realized I don't have to try to be strong and courageous. I am strong and courageous. I don't have to try at all. I just am this. And I can relax into my true self and I can be compassionate with myself because I'm wired this way. And it used to be, it was just like, nobody else is like this. Why am I like this? Right? It's like, you know what? You're wired this way, Cheryl. Just accept that and rejoice in it. And now I am to the point that I can rejoice in that. I don't use it. It's not like, don't judge me. No. I love myself, but I am compassionate with myself because I make mistakes, and I'm compassionate with other people. Probably the greatest blessing to me is that I now can begin to understand what makes other people tick. Why are they the way they are? I think I might have mentioned this last month. I can remember when I would early on go to OA meetings, and there would always be somebody in the room who would say something like, oh, I always put other people first. Okay, I'm an 8. And so when people would say that before, like early in program and certainly before Enneagram, I would inside roll my eyes like, yeah, we all put other people first, right? I just thought they were better liars than me. I really did. I just thought they were just better liars. And what I realized is, no, they're wired differently than I am. They literally do. Now, here's what's interesting with the 2. The Enneagram 2 does put other people first, but there's a hook on that love, right? So they're gotcha, like I have gotchas, right? But the gotcha for the 2 is the fact that they do all this stuff for other people so they will feel loved, so they will be loved, and they never quite feel loved. So until that shell is cracked and that ego structure is dissipated, they never hear thank you. They never feel the love come back to them. And they are loved, but they don't feel it. It blocks that from them, right? So there's always that hook, and they're always trying to do more and more and more so that they can be loved at least a little, and they never feel the love because that ego structure is in place, making them not feel it. And that's sad, but I do understand now the shares from those early people that would say that. I'm like, oh, that's what's going on. And they have a completely different view of the world than I do. All right. And then here is the 9. I'm actually in pretty good shape. Here is the 9. And the 9 is known as the peacemaker. Their passion is sloth, and that doesn't mean laziness. It means like a willingness to delay decision and action. So they're willing to delay. And their virtue is right action, and right action at the right time. And their mantra is resolve small things before they become big things. The new title is The Gentle Mystic, and I love this little picture of the sloth. So cute. The Gentle Mystic. They are striving to feel at peace by avoiding directness, avoiding conflict, and avoiding making a decision. And obviously that ties to their mantra, I think, very nicely. So one of the things that I do with each of these different steps, because that our workshop is set up step 1, step 2, and so forth. So we go through the steps, and then how does the Enneagram tie to that? Is I talk about for each of the steps, why might this step be difficult for my particular type? And I do this slide for each of the weeks. And it's really interesting because I threw this in at the last minute because I thought, oh, this might be kind of interesting, but it seems like it's the thing people like the most. Okay. So step 1 would be difficult, or might be difficult for a type 1, because the type 1s believe that they need to keep the perfect illusion going. The lie that they live under, we talked about, is that life, I should be perfect and life should be perfect. And they need to keep that perfect illusion going. And so admitting powerlessness and admitting that your life is unmanageable, especially the unmanageable part, really hard for a type 1. For the type 2, they seek their self. And once again, I learned years ago when I was in the middle of one of my walks through the steps, that selfishness and self-seeking are different. Selfishness is doing things for yourself and disregarding others. Self-seeking is seeking your sense of self from other people. At least that's the way I learned it, seeking my sense of self. So I seek my sense of self in others, right? Instead of affirming that self-love, I'm looking for that from the outside. So I'm seeking my sense of self in others to be loved. How could someone so giving be an addict, right? So the idea of admitting that you're powerless over anything for a 2 is really hard because they're so giving and they don't understand. And they almost never see themselves stepping on the toes of their fellows, almost never, because they're so giving, right? And how can they be an addict? This is unfair. This is wrong. And that's, but once again, seeking their sense of self from others to be loved. The type 3 seeks their sense of self in others to be admired. Okay, isn't being successful proof that I'm not an addict, right? So once again, and 3s are really good at denial. And so the 3s, if they, it's difficult for them to see themselves as addicted. I do want to say too that the way that I say step 1 now, and through the years, this just taught me, instead of admitted we were powerless over food, in my case, food, that my life had become unmanageable. I say acknowledge, not admitted. Admitted has a guilt piece to it. I don't like that. So I say acknowledge that I am powerless over reality. Food is beside the point. Whatever my drug of choice is beside the point. The real issue, I mean, certainly there's addictive things. I'm not saying that. But the idea here is it's really the fact that I am not. And I learned this from studying emotional sobriety, Ellen Berger's emotional sobriety, right? It's like I am absolutely completely powerless over reality. And I even say reality doesn't care what my opinion is at all. At all. My opinion is completely irrelevant to reality, right? Reality is what reality is. So I acknowledge that I have no control over that. And note that 8 is a control thing, right? Okay. All right. So that's for the 3. For the 4, my need to feel intense emotion prevents me from seeing my powerlessness. So 4s tend to go in the direction of melancholy, and they generally like intense emotions, and that prevents them from seeing their powerlessness. The 5, knowledge is power. If I know enough, I am never powerless. So the lie that the 5 lives under is that knowing enough is the answer to everything, right? Knowledge is the answer to everything. So it makes it very difficult for them to admit powerlessness and even to admit that their life is unmanageable. The 6, my inability to trust prevents surrender. Like I said, 6s are afraid of not being afraid. And I mean, it's very, very deep, very complex. I think the 6s, of all the ones that I've at least studied, the 6s are like, whew, really complex. But it's really difficult for they're the ones, by the way, that make the lists of all the things that could possibly go wrong. And one of the exercises I have is to make a list of all the things that could possibly go right, which is a big challenge for the 6 to look at it from that perspective. But they have trouble trusting. So that prevents surrender, because if you're going to surrender to something, you better be able to trust it. The 7 feels like surrender limits my options and it might not be fun. 7s love to have fun and they love to have lots and lots of options. And they look at this and it's possible would say, well, that's a little too limiting for me. For the 8, surrender implies that I'm not in charge. And if I'm not in charge, who is in charge? And I get to evaluate whether they're trustworthy or not. Right. So yeah, the 8s like to be in charge. Absolutely. And then the 9s, surrender equals stepping into life. And I'd rather be numb and comfortable. So the 9s are the ones that sit, with a bag of Doritos and watch television, right? It's more than just, all of us might do that, right? But the 9s like really pull themselves. Basically, they choose to check out. That's the way that they kind of live their life. Okay. I'm going to talk about the weekly wrap-ups, and these are out on Surrender School under step 1. So when you look at it, there's a session 0, which is what I did last month, basically what I did last month here. And then this is session 1, which is also step 1. So if you go out to Surrender School, you can actually find copies of this with the challenges, but I'm going to go ahead and read the challenges. Okay, so for the 1, if you are a type 1, if you don't know your type, just kind of hang out and listen and pick one that seems kind of interesting to you. You usually seek to feel perfect, so do one of these this week. Seek criticism. Find somebody that'll tell you something you're doing wrong, right? Seek criticism. Break a rule, but don't get arrested. And then do something completely illogical. For the type 2, you usually seek to feel connected, so do one of these this week. Take care of a need for yourself that you've been ignoring, okay? Spend at least an hour completely alone and not distracted, right? Okay, and then say no to someone who you believe may actually need help. The 2s are almost incapable of saying no to someone if they perceive in any way the person would need help. So that would be a real challenge, or could be for a 2. Okay, for the type 3, you usually like to feel outstanding, so do one of these this week. Try something you're pretty sure that you will fail at. Be alone for an hour and feel sad and cry about a past event. So the 2, 3, and 4, the past is very alive to them, but the 3 tries to avoid any kind of like strong emotions. So be alone for an hour and feel sad. Let yourself cry. And then the 3, do a task that is usually easy with your non-dominant hand. No knives, please, but do something with your non-dominant hand so that you do it poorly. Okay, for the type 4, you usually like to feel unique, so do one of these this week. Spend some time somewhere like in nature that makes you feel small and let yourself feel small. Blend in with the crowd. That's the next one. Blend in with the crowd. And finally, talk with someone about the weather or some other kind of small talk. And don't make it big talk, right? Cataclysmic and all. There's just, small talk. I'm not good at small talk either, so. All right. Type 5, you usually like to feel sufficient, so do one of these this week. Emotionally react to a sad animal movie like Old Yeller or Ring of Bright Water. It's about otters. It's really cute. Give yourself permission to cry if you feel like it. The next one, spend an hour in a crowd and feel part of the crowd, not just observing, like really get into a sporting event or really get into a movie. And then finally, ask an expert a question about a topic that you know nothing about, and be the quiet learner and don't research it beforehand. Okay. The type 6, you usually like to feel secure, so do one of these this week. Follow someone else's instructions. Do something that you have not prepared for at all, like something completely unprepared for, and allow yourself to feel that you may not be enough and journal on it. So one of the fears of the 6, they fear that they are not enough. So this says, allow yourself to feel that you're not enough. Okay, now journal on that. What does that feel like? Don't be afraid of feeling that, right? Feelings are feelings. They might be real, but they are not necessarily true, right? So yeah, let yourself feel it. Okay, the type 7, You usually like to feel satisfied, so do one of these this week. Decide to feel angry, judgmental, some negative emotion about a character in a movie, and then journal about that. Sevens usually do not let themselves feel that way about other people. They don't want to do that, right? Those move on. So this is one. It's safer to do it like a character in a movie. How would you feel about that? And that might give some insight. All right, the next one is stand in line at a grocery store, stand in the longest line, and do not move to a shorter line. Do not move to it. The ones that when you're in a grocery store and there's somebody that's jumping from shortest line to shortest line, they're almost for sure a seven. Okay. And then finally, make a 7-item to-do list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And item by item, do them. No jumping around. Do one after another after another. Okay. That'll be a challenge for a 7. Okay. The 8, you usually like to feel powerful, so do one of these this week. Ask for something by dropping hints rather than asking directly. That's one I couldn't do. I finally just had to give in. All right. And then for the 8, stand in line in a grocery store, stand in the longest line and don't switch to a shorter line. No yelling at anybody. You don't get to get mad at anybody. And then finally, in a safe place with no obstacles to trip over, let someone blindfold you and lead you around. It's the reason I put that on there. I had knee replacement surgeries, 2 of them a few years ago. And my poor husband, I mean, it was so difficult for me to ask for help, but I couldn't do anything. So anyway, and he was very sweet and very helpful. He was an Enneagram 5. He was very helpful and very nice, but it felt very uncomfortable to basically allow someone else to help me. Even someone, I've been married 43 years. I've been with him 47 years, right? I love him dearly, but even that was hard. Okay. And the type 9, you usually like to feel at peace. So do one of these this week. Order a very specific meal at a restaurant. And what I mean by that is, I'd like the burger cooked 2 minutes on each side. Like, I mean, so specific. I'd like just a dollop of mustard, like that kind, the kind that if you were a server, if you were a waitress, it would drive you absolutely up the walls for someone to order this way. I want the 9 to order like that. Be direct and unapologetic. Almost impossible to do that for a 9. Almost impossible. Okay. Play against someone and force yourself to be very competitive. Some 9s are competitive, like in games and that kind of stuff. So anyway, try that. And then finally, make a decision that you've been putting off. No contracts, please, but make a decision that you've been putting off. All right. We do have office hours on Tuesday and Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, which works for people in Europe sometimes. So as a matter of fact, most of the people that come to the office hours are in Europe. And then it's the same meeting as if you go out and register on Surrender School for the sessions, that gives you access to all of the videos, and it also gives you all the information for the meeting and that kind of stuff. So you can come to that. We are going to add probably a Wednesday early evening Pacific time, another office hour for people that in the United States, that so that they can come after work if they want to do that. And this is actually a great time to ask questions about your type and that kind of stuff. And once again, all of this is about to pique your interest in the Enneagram and give you enough of an idea that, oh, I think this would be a good spiritual tool. And then there's so many resources that are so deep that you can really get into this if you'd like to. And it really, the goal is to learn to love yourself, right? This kind of self-love, and not to love that personality ego structure thing, right? That we sometimes fall in love with, but your true self, and to be compassionate with yourself and with other people. All right. So before the next session, right, what I basically tell everyone to do is memorize the mantra and do the step 1 challenge. And then for your type, go to Surrender School, register for the Triple E workshop, and you'll be given access to all the information. And you may even want to attend. We'd love to have you there.